Please welcome the President of Travel Units at Amadeus IT Group, Decius Valmorbida, in conversation with Skift Senior Travel Tech Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Hello, Decius. Thank you so much for joining us live from Madrid today. We're very grateful to have you.
Thanks, Sean. I almost didn't make it for connectivity issues, but here I am.
It wouldn't be an event during the pandemic unless we had some technical issues, but I'm liking the beard. Is that a pandemic innovation?
Well, as you see, facial hair seems to be the trend now on post-pandemic look. I think I'm just part of the statistics.
I'm liking it. I think it suits you. I think it does. So you're in charge of the largest revenue generating unit at Amadeus, and Amadeus is the largest travel tech company in the world. So you're ideally placed to talk to us about how the pandemic is impacting the travel industry. So let's start there, Decius. What are your takeaways about how the travel sector is going to be emerging from the crisis?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a rebuild for our industry. I mean, we had historical patterns that we cannot trust anymore. I think we're all forecasting lower volumes, and we're going to face an economical crisis after the health crisis. So we're going to see consumers with less money, less disposable income. We're going to see us driving value, because that's going to be a shock on the productivity of all actors, how to keep the price if we have lower volumes, plus the trends that existed before, which is we were lagging behind on customer experience, we were lagging behind on digitalization. So it's kind of the perfect storm, but it is a rebuild, meaning loads of opportunities on whoever can figure it out, all of those elements first.
That makes sense. So how is Amadeus sort of like trying to respond and take advantage as we come out of the crisis?
I think it is very difficult for us to predict who exactly is going to emerge as the winner or not. I think the market is going to be very fluid. So what we try to do is look at customer trends. As I mentioned, leisure seems to be recovering faster than the rest of the segment, so we should be there. Domestic faster, so we have to be there. Lots of projects around modernization, simplification, digitalization. So we would like to invest in those areas. And I think something that is new, I think the need for collaboration. So very much the industry was able to operate in silos because there was growth for everybody. I think now when we talk about creating customer value, requires players to collaborate. And then there is going to be a need of integrating distributors, providers, airports. So I think that's another bet that we're making, being more an integrated ecosystem rather than isolated silos.
That makes sense. So I'd like to build on that. We heard a moment ago from my colleague Seth at Skift Research, and among the points he made was that different markets are going to have different opportunities. So what is your take on the recovery for emerging markets relative to developed markets? Will they be faster or slower out of the recovery?
Yeah. So I think that the bet on emerging markets is a safe bet. First, because of the nature of the traffic, as we described, emerging markets have more leisure than business. So leisure is going to be there, more domestic than international. So they're going to be there. But I think the other key point is travel did not carry the weight on emerging markets they have on the developed markets. So I think they're going to be less affected by the economical crisis. There is going to be an element of overcapacity. So you have to deploy capacity, and you can stimulate the emerging markets at the right price. You can get lots of passengers that couldn't travel before. So I think the beginning is bright for emerging markets. We're going to see faster recovery there. On developed markets, we have the consumer safety. We're talking about governments that impose restrictions. We're talking about an economy that needs to grow because of the penetration of travel already. So that will probably be a bit slower, even though large domestic markets will fare better than those that were more prone to international. So US probably recovering better than Europe. That's our predictions at the moment.
And how about for the airline sectors? Who are going to be the winners and losers given some of the factors you've talked about? Low cost carriers versus traditional network carriers, et cetera.
Yeah, I think given the magnitude of the crisis, it is hard for us to speak about winners. No, it is like who loses less. No, it is like we have been all losers in this game. But yes, for sure, low-cost carriers who are more geared toward leisure, more geared toward point-to-point and domestic, they have suffered less. So we will probably see that happening better. I think that large groups of airlines, they're having a lot of support from governments. So I think the crisis can be a good opportunity for them to reorganize, rework their cost, and become more competitive. So I expect that to be an interesting element as well. And the market, I think, is going to open a lot of opportunity for startups because I think once this crisis is over, there is going to be planes, pilots, crews, lots of assets available. And I think entrepreneurs will look into that as an opportunity to enter the market because the tendency now is for consolidation and competition is always welcome. So those are, let's say, my bets.
That makes logical sense. And so to build about airlines, so Amadeus in September signed a landmark deal with Air France KLM, but most of the large airline groups have not yet come to commercial terms with their distribution partners. We just did an audience poll and we asked people, how long do you think it's going to be until a majority of the airlines and tech partners have reached to a consensus on what the new commercial terms, and they were saying about 2022 had the majority bet, 2023 or so. What do you think is the timetable for when we'll get to a consensus?
Okay. Look, I think that we have lots and lots of deals on the pipeline. I think 21 is going to be a strong year. We have already announced many names. You mentioned Air France KLM. We have American Airlines. We have Qantas and others. Based on the amount of deals that we are dealing with, because every single airline in the planet would like to review their cost base, and this means that they would like to review their commercial relationship with Amadeus. So it means that we are negotiating plenty of agreements. So lots of announcements in terms of agreements in 21. That's my forecast. But I think the audience is right in terms of when that is going to hit the shops, let's say this way, because all of these projects require implementation time. So it means that it's going to take us the 12 months until those are implemented. So I think it is a safe bet to think that 22 is really the year where we're going to see more transactions on, let's say, on NDC, and 21 is going to be a big year of announcements rather than real production.
Okay. As you know, I'm going to be speaking after I chat with you with the head of distribution for Lufthansa Group, Timur Guduzupar, and you two know each other, your teams know each other. Can you talk about what are the quality of the conversations you're having with them in terms of contract discussions?
It is great quality of the conversation. I even traveled to see Timur in November, so it means that things are still going well. There are elements that we agree. I think that Amadeus and Lufthansa, we have a very broad relationship. In distribution specifically, I think that we're seeing more and more a convergence of our vision and their vision in terms of technology. So I think there is where there is strong agreement. The part that we still haven't been able to bridge is the business model. That's where we still remain a challenge. For now, we're trying to convince them of our view of the world by showing the success with these other deals that we're signing. I think they would like to show us their view of the world with the deals that they are signing. So let's see what the agency community think about the two propositions. And anyway, I think that given the size of Amadeus and Lufthansa, I think we're bound to find an agreement eventually. So we'll see. But for now, we are making different bets.
That makes sense. You mentioned the agency community. So how do you think the agency community is going to come out of this? Like, is there going to be more consolidation? What impacts?
Yeah, I mean, first we need to see let's call it small players, mid-sized players, large players. I think small and mid-sized players, they manage to adapt faster to the crisis because they have a more flexible cost base. So I think there are a lot of bets that we would have many agencies simply going out of the business. I don't think that is going to be the case. I think they have been able to adjust. And the large agencies, they have funding. So even though they have a high cost, they have, let's say, ownership and partners and owners and stakeholders that essentially will make sure that they have the adequate funding so that they see the other end of the crisis. So I think in numbers of players, we're going to see very much the same. The trend of consolidation is a reality. So irrespective of the COVID crisis, I think consolidation will continue. Why? Because it's like you have a concentration on the provider side. Few and fewer airlines are concentrating more and more inventory. So you're going to see on the, let's say, downstream side, on the demand side, you're going to see a natural consolidation. So I think that will continue to exist and will be the trend for the years to come.
Okay, thank you, Decius. Something that came up earlier in our sessions today, Greg O'Hara of Centaurus, he talked about, he has access to they're an investor in American Express GBT, and they saw data in Brazil in particular that there was an incipient demand recovery in flights there. And that informed Centaurus's decision to invest in November in Azul, the Brazilian carrier. So that made me think that Amadeus, you have access to a lot of data. You're very skilled at teasing insights out of that data. Does that data savvy sort of mean that you're sort of strategically holding the cards in a strong position as you come out of the crisis?
So I think, as you said, data will be vital on this game. I think in two dimensions. First is where do you deploy capacity? Greg has just made a very clever use of that data for his investment decisions. I think that all providers will be saying, where will demand spark first? Where recovery is going to be? The industry had long cycles in the past. We're talking about opening routes and markets that would take 2-3 years for them to break even. So long-term investment cycles. With the crisis and the situation, I don't think we're going to have that luxury. And we're going to see a lot more data-driven market and deployment of capacity. So I think that's first. Second is the personalization aspect. As we mentioned, we're going to have lower volumes. So this means that every trip will count, and you would like to take most amount of dollars out of every trip. So understanding who's the traveler, what is the data, what is the preferences, I think that is going to increase your likelihood of extracting that additional yield, and that is going to be the norm. That's why so much focus on areas, both on network planning as well as on all of the merchandising techniques.
That makes sense, Decius. It sounds like yield optimization is good, and sort of getting more out of every trip that actually does get booked is going to be even more important than ever. We have a couple of audience questions. So what are Amadeus's plans to penetrate the B2C market, the direct-to-consumer market?
Yeah. Look, it is not really our intent to go into B2C. I think that the way that we have handled business is being a B2B provider and providing our customers the tools for them to be successful on the B2C. Our interest is more and more now technology is procured based on outcome, based on results. So I think that's our interest. It's like just saying that our piece of software is great. It is not enough anymore. We really need to show conversion. We really need to show yield hike. We really need to show business results from a consumer point of view. So I think that's our interest on the C world, is making, let's say, our solutions provide tangible results for our customers. But in terms of positioning ourselves there, we leave that space for our network of customers. I think that they are well equipped to cater for all of the consumer needs.
We have another audience question. It's about NDC. I thought we were going to get through this whole conversation about using the phrase NDC. It stands for New Distribution Capability. It's technically about messaging standards between computers, but metaphorically, it's about more modern ways of selling travel. And Amadeus has been working very hard. You've had many announcements about your adoption of this. The audience question is, with it becoming a more relevant mode of distribution, how does that affect the global distribution systems?
Look, it affects profoundly the global distribution systems because essentially we need to rebuild the standard. I mean, we had a static way of doing things. That was the EDIFACT standard. NDC is a dynamic standard. So essentially means rebuilding the aggregation layer, rebuilding all of the integration layer. So we're starting new, let's say this way, with making sure that it's backward compatible, making sure that whatever is new NDC works with the old world, which is EDIFACT. I think positions Amadeus very well in that sense, because we were the leader of the defect. I think we know very well how to make the two worlds bridge. And I think at NDC, we're showing, based on the adoptions of travel agencies and airlines, that we are going to be ahead. Do I see benefit for all of the industry in adopting it? Yes, because we just discussed yield is going to be the key driver, dynamic, data-driven. And honestly, NDC is a standard that is more adapted to this new reality, does our heavy investment as Amadeus, and I think does the number of announcements that are coming out as airlines are betting heavily on that trend, as well as, let's say, their safety net to what is to expect as part of the recovery curve.
Okay, thanks, Decius. With about a minute left, the climate, I know, has been an issue that has been important to you. What is your message to the travel sector to understand about climate as we come out of this crisis?
I think that because of the COVID crisis, very much the climate discussion and the sustainability discussion has gone a little silent. I think that when we talk to governments and we talk to consumers, so we're looking at the Pacific, we're looking at Europe, we have a change in administration in the US. I think we're looking into all signs that governments and consumers will put a lot more pressure on the industry around what are we doing exactly for our environmental concern. So this means that our growth is going to come, but it's going to come at a cost where we're going to have to explain to the public opinion our growth. Is it really helping and supporting economies, but what are we doing to the planet and to the environment? So I think the more transparent we can be about, number one, what exactly is our level of emissions, helping consumers make right choices, and explaining how they can make better choices to support us in what is going to be this long journey ahead of making the industry environmentally sustainable. I think that we all have to put that on the agenda, and it is vital for the growth that we consider for free today to be sustainable in the long run. So I think that's the commitment of Amadeus and how we're going to make the industry transparently talk to this about consumers and support the endeavors of governments.
That makes sense. It makes sense. If travel doesn't publicize what the accurate impact is of it, others will come in, maybe they'll have distorted impressions, and it's opportunity to sort of help consumers comparison shop. Decius, thank you so much for speaking with us today from Madrid Live. We're really grateful.
Thanks, Sean.